So we got the 4 bolts from underneath the seat here. Now we're just taking a look at the plug-ins. And this seat has heat and power and all that, so there's numerous plug-ins. There's one here and there's one here. I removed those as well as one of those clips. Now we're going to go under here. We're going to get that clip is out, and I just have this pin here, and once this one comes out, I'll be able to pull the whole electrical cord back towards the back, through the hole, and down and underneath. There's what it looks like underneath the seat. So we're going to get these wires out of the way, heat tape and zip straps. We'll get those permanently out of the way. We're going to look at the mount for the ESPAR right in that location. We have our wiring harness here. This wire here, it's got the 2 green wires here, and it goes to our fuel pump. We're going to be fitting the fuel pump length properly, then we'll connect the end that's supplied to here to plug into that. This one we're going to use later when we go to plug in our heat temperature sensor. This one we're not going to use, but we can't do anything with it. Don't bend, leave it alone. It's perfect. This one here, it's attached to our power wire, and the power wire is the one with the 2 wires, the 2 10 gauge wires sticking out, red and brown. That's our power wire. We're going to leave our fuse on there. And last but not least, I cut this back already, but this is just a multi-wired thing. It's for putting in one of those manual timer things that you'd use in a heavy truck. So what we're going to do now, take our plug-in, which is here. I'm just going to plug that in. There's no power or anything to it. And then I'm going to find the best way to run this. Like I said, there's that one section, do not bend. I want to run my power wire out under the seat and around. I'm not going to put it into my house or into my starting battery. It's going to go into my house battery, but I can run it down along the floor and around. So I'm just going to place this in here flat. My connection, this is the air intake. There's no problem with that. These can just sit by themselves up in the corner. I'll probably get some tape to tape them down. This is my fuse and power, so I'll bring it around. I'll take it underneath the vent here again. And pull it over to here. And the reason for that is this is your fuse for the whole system. So if for some reason something happens, it shuts down, you can't reboot it or whatever, you're going to want to get at this fuse. So this is our little door from the side of the underneath the seat. We'll be able to reach in there and grab it. So I'm just going to leave that on there. And I'm just going to put this power wire basically again underneath, and I'm going to come out the side hole right about here on the side of the seat. This part of the floor isn't fastened down yet, so I can just take it and slide it back. But what I'm going to do first of all is just lift this bit that I cut back later. I'm going to run my power wire through here. And now I have my power wire running out underneath my seat and over to the other side there. So the rest of these wires, I'm just going to grab some tape and tape them in nicely so they're not moving around and they're not rattling in an empty box, and they're in a good spot. This is the air intake back here. We may or may not cut a little vent, or I might use this plastic piece here. Just put a couple of CNC lines in it for venting. There's enough holes in here to do it like underneath and so on, so I don't think it's going to be an issue anyway, but we might add those later. As we showed the other day, got this mounted in. Now I have my exhaust vent running and coming out on this side. My fuse piece will be set up right here so I can access it through the hatch in case I have a problem. These wires go back into my powered seat, and this one here will be plugged into there to go to the Easy Start Pro, which is back there. So underneath the van we have our air intake here, and I ran mine forward up over top of this, and it comes down here right behind the wheel well. So I thought this was not a bad spot. It's up out of any place that should get sprayed. It's facing straight down. We should get a fair bit of fresh air from here. The exhaust on this side I ran up over top of the vehicle muffler, and then along the vehicle muffler here and through the muffler for the exhaust. I attach it here to the drive shaft housing on the side. I know it doesn't stick out as far as it should, but that's kind of all the flex that we had. I thought it was a good place, quite a ways from the air intake, and if I find a place that I can find some more of that 1-inch tubing, I'll probably go from the muffler and I might reinstall it along here and bring it out somewhere back there behind the sliding door. So we had to run the fuel pump wire, which is the two green wires, and I brought it down through one of the holes in the bottom and out through a hole in the chassis. And I ran it over top of the muffler housing and along over top of the fuel tank, and then over top of the fuel wires, and ran it down, and I mounted the fuel pump in this location here. This looks like a slightly better place to put the fuel pump, so it would be just a little bit higher, a little bit more in line with the fuel plumbing and so on. But don't mount it up here, because this is the step in from your door, and any screw could possibly go through into the plastic of your doorstep. So just down here should be fine. Again, I think it's well out of the way, anti-vibration. Got a nice screw in there, put in some silicone and so on, and I hooked up the other end of the plug-in for the fuel pump. So today I'm going to get the fuel line, and I'm going to run it and this through some heat-resistant tubing, and I'm going to bring the fuel over to this side here. So I bought a roll of this heat-resistant coating or heat-resistant tube. I'm going to run my fuel line and my fuel electric line through this and then run it underneath the van. So now that our wire and fuel line are through this heat-resistant tape, we're going to fasten our fuel line onto the little metal fuel fitting that's up at the top. So I've pre-set one of our tubes with a number 7 millimeter socket, and we're just going to push that onto the end of the fuel line like so until you get an inch or so in there. So I can feel it now up past the hose clamp. So I'm just going to tighten that hose clamp some onto there. I can just see it starting to apply a little bit of pressure onto the line. And I'm just going to moisten the outside of that. And I'm going to push my hose right up until it hits the bottom of the van. And then I'll know it's on there. Just being careful you don't bend it. It should push right up. And I can feel it now. It's just touching where the bottom of the van is. Then I'm going to set my hose clamp up into place above the bulge. You might have to loosen the hose clamp a bit to get it over the flange on the end of the metal tube. Once you're satisfied that the hose clamp is above the flange, you can tighten that hose clamp. So now you can see we got two hose clamps and our fuel line coming out of there. Comes down, joins up with our electrical line. I'm going to run a little piece of braided hose covering actually up into this hole, just in case there's any wear or so on that. So I'm going to get done that, and then we're going to attach it all together here and get up over top of our muffler protection plate. So as you can see here, I just ran a plastic covering up through the fuel line and also onto the electrical, which runs up through here. Came down, pushed it into the heat resistant tubing, ran down, put a couple of zip ties on there. So now what I'm going to do is measure out my fuel line. My electrical line's already measured out because I did have it over to the other side already. So now I'm going to pull it over, just make sure I have enough fuel line to make it up to the plug-in up there. And then I'm going to feed it up over the top of here and over to where we're going to plug in the fuel line and plug in the electrical. I ran my fuel line and electrical up through here, ran over top as many things as I could, and then came down this strut. And at the end here I attached a piece of heat shrink tubing just to hold it all together. And this line, we're just going to bring it around and we're going to cut it and fit it onto there with a couple fittings. So I push my supply line on here. I try and push them on at about an inch, and then use a number 7 socket and tighten these up. Need to be tightened so they don't move, and there is some pressure, but remember you don't want to cut off your internal line. So you can kind of see it starting to squeeze there, and that's not going anywhere, so I'm pretty happy where that is. And that one I've already got. So I got myself plugged in here. See how that's sitting up on the top? I'm going to use some of this coating here again. This is just for electrical line normally, but it's pretty good for just about everything. So that'll help protect the line. We'll probably zip tie this corner up onto our pump just to ensure it doesn't fall out. So I've measured my fuel supply line, and this fitting comes with the kit as a large hole at one end and a small hole at the other end. And this is a quick connect for our auxiliary line that's already in our diesel tank. So I'm going to push this end onto here, put this end in the small end. It's a small hose, that's a large hose clamp. And I'm going to use a small hose clamp on there, and I'm going to put in our supply line. So you can see I got my hose clamps on there and my quick connect. So I'm going to now put some of that heat resistant shield on here and then go underneath, and I'll probably connect this onto our pump first and then clip in our piece. So there we are. We've got our fuel pump set up with our out to the heater, our supply line. We put another coating on the supply line of that electrical protection, and it goes all the way up and plugs in up here to our supply line from our fuel tank. So I'm going to get a couple of zip straps, zip strap these up here. I'm just going to check we have all our fittings on here and are tight. And then we'll go and check the other end and we'll start it up for a test run. So yesterday we took our controller wire. This end here will plug into the controller for the ESPAR heater. It's one of those easy start ones. We ran it up here and along the van at the top, and we're going to run it up inside the headliner up here, and then I ran it down through the doorpost, runs all the way down through there, and it comes down the corner here and runs along just underneath this plastic molding here and pops into the inside right there. So we're going to wire this plug up for the green wire, which is the fuel connector for the fuel pump here. And we need to wire this piece into here with the pins and the grommets. So first of all, I'm just going to split the wire here, or at least the casing anyway. I'll peel back an inch of the green wire, and we'll carefully strip these two ends, twist the wires, coating of the wire sits right inside those there, and the actual wire gets crimped up in this area. So once the pins are attached to the wires, in this case there's two green, so it doesn't matter which side they go on. Put them into the housing with the grommets, and then push the grommets down inside the plug for a watertight seal. There's then a little plastic cap, and you can push the cap on top to hold the grommets in, and it gives you a really nice finished and watertight seal. And then you'll have to do the same with the four wires that go to your Easy Start. In this case though, you'll have to be particularly careful lining the wires up with the right pins. So I went through the quick startup menu and got it running, and I timed it for about 30 minutes. The first time I ran it, it shut down, and that's because there was still fuel getting to the system. It takes a couple of minutes or maybe 2 tries till all the air comes out of the system. It will come up here with an error code, and I can just show you where to get to the error code. To clear it is if you go to the gear, select the gear, then long press the return button. It says workshop, it says language, and you can rotate again, start depart, error memory, and then select error memory. And you can either select the H1 or the control head, and if you select the H1 and select it, and you can either read it or just go ahead and delete it. If I read now, it'll come up as no errors, but it had an error that said fuel pump or fuel, and I just deleted that and then went back and restarted the system. So we just go back to the beginning, long pressing the center and then restarting it. So if you like the video, subscribe and stay tuned, because the floor is coming up next.